set your mind on in that context in a 5 to 10 year business, it's a question of how you're going to do that. If there's a business model for it, if there isn't a business model for it, then you should be getting to that in the first place. If there's a business model for it, you have to get to that. But it's an encyclopedia. There'll be 9,900 of those varieties. Sports training is a business. Now, I can sit here and have a conversation about sports training and you'll say, is it a business? Yeah. Okay. One would think, is just ball pen business, making ball pens and selling them out like Camlin has done, or X has done, or Y has done, or somebody else has done, would that level? Of course it can. It's too generic a question to answer.
One more question. What does an investor or a VC forecast or sees in an entrepreneur's idea? That would be only tags. Secondly,
would be only
tags. Rather, as of now, IIT. Second, the reports, surveys, or even the gut feeling or the power what that idea has.
No, I think really key investors look at two things in an entrepreneur. One is the guts, and that's all encompassing because guts is including guts, clarity of thought, gumption, courage, which means they will stick it through come what may. Every time there's a problem, we'll say, I don't have a choice, I have to make this work, and you go for it. That's what I mean by guts. Guts doesn't mean the balls to take a risk the first time and the second time. Guts is, I don't have a choice. There's nobody looking over your shoulder. You're going to go for it, come what may, and therefore he'll stay with it. And wherever time he'll have, he'll turn it around. He or she will turn it around and make it into a success. And I think the second one is really smartness, bordering on real smartness. How really smart an entrepreneur is. I wouldn't use the word genius because I think that's different. That's a very Silicon Valley kind of word, but very smart and gutsy. Actually, whether you are boiled down to that, those are the formulas for success.
Yeah, so my first question was the same that he asked. The key things the angel investors...
What's the ready reckoner for...
The next question I have is, most of the businesses, the entrepreneurs who are starting up in India, are the ideas which are already being tested in West. So is it like we should blindly go ahead and replicate those ideas here? Like Flipkart has done it for Amazon. Like they worked over there and did the same model over here, replicated the same model. And we see that most of the ideas are the same that are there in the West. So is it like, should we blindly pursue those ideas if we see that there is an opportunity there is a market in the West?
No, there's no need to, and I don't think all ideas are copy ideas in that context. I think a lot of family businesses that have started long before anyone in the West was doing that can happen to originate from India, and they do. So again, you're going back again to what you read in the consumer media, and then go into that one style as far as that's concerned. In fact, I think in the IT business, I wish we had copied the West. We'd have had a lot of more intellectual property than really fantastic scalable IT companies. But we didn't start and build our own Windows or our own Microsoft equivalent in India. If we were really copying, we would have actually got to that. So, no, I don't think everything is a copy. It's a service sector. So, I mean, it's like saying, because people did real estate there, people are doing real estate here. Now, that's not a copy in that sense, but obviously different challenges for that. But I would say that at least...
No, sir, but is it like a testimony that something is being tested over there, so I should go ahead?
But I think you look at the education sector here today, everything is ground up, it's very, very unique and different because you can't take it what happens in the West. Agriculture and whatever else you're looking at here, cold storage is not, it'll be and their listed companies there are just airport shuttle services. You think we can copy that and bring that here and start airport shuttle service in the next 20 years? No. So, it's too generality again. I wouldn't blow my mind on that. If you are focusing on something, focus on what you want to do. And no, not everybody's copying.
Good evening, sir. My name is Preeti Shetty. I just want to ask multi-cuisine restaurants, like when it comes to like multi-cuisine restaurants, people normally have a thought that in Indian market it would be a difficult thing because people don't adjust with the like multi-cuisine, different countries, specialities or something. Do you think it would sustain or it would be a challenging thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong viewpoint on this. I would only say one thing, 9 out of 10 restaurants don't work. And this is not India. In New York City, which has got the maximum restaurants of concentration of any city, 9 out of 10 restaurants shut down within a year. So that's just the law of averages. It's a combination of taste, it's a combination of fad, it's a combination of regular customers and clients, it's a combination of which street corner and what your location is, and so many other things. But most problems with the restaurant, as compared to institutionalized food, like a McDonald's or whatever else what you do, is the back end. So when it's so chef specific, if that moves, everything moves. Right? So when something is so chef specific, and the reason why people look at a restaurant and it's a much more mom and pop approach is because it is personalized. You can't have your best chef going, and you got those best, what I would call the Michelin star restaurants. There's always 2 or 3 or a cluster of 2 or 3 or 4, and never more. So that's the nature of the restaurant business. It's either very boutique. The law of averages is mostly against you on that thought process because it's so personalized, and that minute that person touch goes away. Now, the generality of restaurant business in India is not, actually multi-cuisine is not the only thing. I think it's a question again getting down to location. Rentals in India are disproportionate. I think the retail industry is having a problem today because the rental industry is at a different path. So for the last 10 years, only the last 2-3 years multiplexes have started making profit. But before that, they were all down in the dumps for 10 years. It's not like suddenly everyone woke up and started eating more popcorn in theaters for these companies to make more money. It's just that rentals got rationalized. So in most of your sectors, you have to figure out what are the ancillary sectors. So you may say whether you're depressed and whether there's an economy up or down, people will always consume food. That's a nice generality statement to make.
Yes.
But what am I going to do with that? It's a theoretical thing. When I'm running the business, I have to be practical about it. Am I in the right location? I think home delivery and convenience is becoming a big thing in India and anywhere else in the world. So outing is nice, but for outing you want something really special. Then there's the price sensitive. With that comes the personalized with your chef. If you look at all of that, you need to really be clear why you're doing that. And if it's for fun, do it. If it's for a business, you have to have a different focus. And the last one is, can you scale it? And chances are in most cases, no. Hi.
I'm Natasha. So actually I recently realized that things that happen few years from now, if you could envision what things will happen in say 5 years or 10 years from now, you could probably use that knowledge to find probably the gap or a wonderful opportunity or leverage it in your business or something.
Well,
And
congratulations,
honestly-
you discovered that quite young. Most people discover that when they're 40 and 45, I think.
And I'll give all the credit and thanks to myself because I just recently learned it from a
Okay.
very enchanting session with him. So, honestly speaking, just having that piece of knowledge is not really like taking this around ahead. I lack that vision, I would confess, at this point of time. Probably with time I gain it, I hope so. I just want to know your view on the whole fact, like when people say there are 400 new smart cities coming up, or the east is going to be the new west, or the power is coming here, or whatever. Like how do you see, like say 10 years from now, any particular time frame, that this place or this India that we call, actually, which is hubbing right now, like it's bubbling right now, how do you think it is going to look or feel, like say in a particular time, future time frame?
Yeah. Again, I think it's just too broad a question, and I don't normally go into too much of crystal ball gazing myself. I think it's a given that when a country is at such a low base, and we're going to grow at 7, 8, 9% in GDP, there's obviously going to be some benefit to everybody as far as that's concerned. But we're a complex country. We're a country that in the last 60 years we've always had a track record of taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Will that change over the next 20, 30 years? It may not. Okay? But it's going to be larger steps forward and larger steps back. So maybe the size of the steps may go forward because of the criticality of what we're doing here. But I still think it's a very complex country. The approach and mentality is for a lot of people to pull it back rather than take it forward. I think the haves and the have-nots, we haven't solved that problem in India at all. 60% of our people do live in rural India. Okay, so you have to discount that. We can't keep saying we're 1.3 billion, 1.3 billion. There is no such market like 1.3 billion. So it's not only that the market is not 1.3 billion, but it's that if you don't solve a little bit of that second of the have-nots, you can't take the haves to a different level. And I'm not talking about anything which will create revolution. It'll just be, it's not possible to do that. Which means that the government and the policy frameworks will have to continue to support the larger vote banks and the people who actually need it for the right reasons. So you always have this very different approach. Now the only other country who's been able to do it very differently is China. But that's because they were communist, right? So they could take 200 million people and say, I've created those cities, now get out of here and go there, and they would just go there. Okay, and you can read the last Economist of this one, where 61 million kids in China don't have parents because they moved at an early age because they were just told to move, and their opportunities stopped in rural and went into urban, and they left the kids behind. They haven't seen them for 10 years and 15 years and 20 years. So, and China already started by that time of single child policy. So it's becoming suddenly an aging country in that context. So there are no perfect transition periods for that. So I'm an India bull, and I would say there's a lot that we can get out and do. So it's extremely positive, but in measure. We'll always have to be measured. We always have to be measured. So I wouldn't use bubbling and frothing and all of that at all, because it's not going to be that case. It's going to be hard work. It is going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's just it. Because we're not going to solve some of our very deeply ingrained problems for a fair period of time. Like the urban-rural divide, whether we like it or not, if 600, 700 million people are, I'm not saying below poverty, but they're just not being able to have what everybody else can have, that's going to be quite a big challenge. I think water is going to be a big challenge for India in the next 10 to 15 years. And that's going to create its own divide. So if you look at those fundamental issues, then always religion and always takes 3 steps back. We're not very good marketeers around the world. So our perception management always takes a blow. And I know our present Prime Minister is a phenomenal ambassador for India and is doing a great job. And I think that really makes a massive difference. If you can get that's the job of a CEO of a company most of the time, is to go out and front it. And I think he's doing the best he can. Except that that's not the only job. For a lot of CEOs, you have a phenomenal, you have a robust business, then you can go out and do that. So, I don't know, that's pretty much what I think. It's a general one.
Good evening, sir. I'm Chanchal Kumar. I'm running a software firm, Summit Software, since last 10 years with my brother. And we have a good solution for software industry in the gems and jewelry industry. We have supplied our software to Japan also. Last month I was in Japan also. So I'm looking at the opportunities as technology is upcoming. Language barrier is going to kill in a coming future. So I'm trying to build my company to tap the Japanese market, and we are working on that. So my current challenges are how to take the partnership or the opportunities in new country.
Yeah.
That's the big challenge. I'm not able to manage it. Arun Segar sir and Chayam Segar ma'am already helping us a lot.
Yeah.
But still I want your views to how to go ahead with that. Because language barrier is going to change by technology. And I see in Skype.
But it's also an opportunity.
Yes.
It's also an opportunity. So
I'm looking at the opportunity.
And I must say, it's difficult to strike a partnership with the Japanese. But once you do, they're one of the longest partnerships you can strike.
Yeah.
And that's a very strong asset for you. So you picked an interesting market. It's not such a small country, and yet it's a small country. Everyone there is so savvy, so you don't need to sell them anything. There is no concept selling to be done in Japan. They've sold it to themselves. I think their will to consume, their will and whatever else is already there. So it's a very different market. It's the US plus in a manner, except that it doesn't have 300 million people, and much less from that point of view. And partnerships are very deep-seated there. So I think those are all the positives. Now, language technology is something that you have to solve, because I think you're on the right track, and that's all I can say at this point.
But still, I am facing since last 10 years we are supplying software. We have some few clients also. But we are able to tap the market, Indians settle in the Japan.
Yeah.
But to face the real Japanese calls, we are having the challenge is we are not able to make the partnership with the Japanese partners. And still, that is the main concern, because if we have faced Japanese face or something, definitely we can grow in the.
How many Japanese people work in your company?
No Japanese.
But you may want to think about that.
So I mean to say, how to tap that? Because we are challenging. Means
No, I'll tap that means I'm just saying think about that and think about that investment you may need to make by getting local people, because they're very insular also in many ways. Japanese are quite insular. So they find a comfort that people are of the courage and of the same level and that same this thing, then that could help. So I don't have a broad sweeping answer. All I can say is getting people in that team. Secondly, do you have an office there?
no.
Yeah, so those are the things that you may not be able to afford it. So I may be giving you inputs that you may not be able to afford. But if you want to really break in that market, they need to feel proximity. They need to feel you're very serious. See, I think Germans and Japanese, they look for long-term relationships. They look for 10, 15, 20 years of relationships. And once they say yes, they don't break contracts that easily. As compared to some of the others that can be quite cut and dry about their approach. I'm not saying that everyone goes breaking contracts. But I think in most cases, they will stand by it longer and have a lot more tolerance to the ups and downs than most other people would. But on the flip side, they're very insular, Japanese. So maybe I think between staffing in some form, the security that you're dead serious about it, and you may not be able to afford it, but having that representative office with a Japanese person there could be a starting point if you want to open that market. And then obviously the product has to support it. But they're also very, very exacting on their quality, like the Germans.
Means, I visited more than 10 times Japan.
Yeah.
I'm learning Japanese also.
Yeah.
I have good clients also.
Yeah.
So we are building on our.
No, I think
software product.
it's worth pushing it to the next level. And if you were to make a little bit more investment with the 1-2 year horizon, it might be not a bad idea. Where do you want to move next?
Okay, Kunal.
Good. Please.
Okay, so this is more of a personal question to you, that your entrepreneurial profile includes, say, Marush came first, then a big thing like Yo Mumba happened, and now you've written like a phenomenal book. So how much of that is passion, how much of that is guts, and how much of that
My
is...
entrepreneurial journey started with Cable TV.
That
I started-
is, I mean, the thing that
That's my
that,
entrepreneurial
that
journey. I don't-
Unity is doing.
No.
is
So just to
different
clarify,
from
no, my
UTV.
entrepreneurial journey didn't start with anything called Marush. It just happened as I was making a few investments. I don't look at that as part of my entrepreneurial journey at all. I think at the time at which I divested from UTV to Disney and carried on to be the managing director of the Walt Disney Company along with UTV combined with India for those 2 years, all I had time for was to make a few investments. And Marush was one of those investments. So I don't consider that. There are 15 extremely interesting investments I made, but they're just investments. I work with those entrepreneurs.
So,
Kabaddi, yes. So now coming to your general question, without these reference to context, I just want to put that.
So, how much of that is passion driven and how much of that is guts, as you mentioned? So, because obviously,
No, it's a combination of both. I mean, the fact it's always a combination of both. They're all right now. They're all absolutely as far as passion is concerned. Because if you're looking at Kabaddi, there's no formula. Most people, when I was looking at it, everyone was staring at me saying, "Why would you back a sport like Kabaddi?" So I think it's a combination of. I was extremely passionate about the fact that we can take a sport and change it around so drastically, and maybe it can work. We thought it would take 2-3 years for it to work. The pleasant surprise that it worked in 6 months. But we were pretty sure it would work. I just thought it would take 2-3 years for it to work. But it worked in 6 months. But I think it was a best example of, obviously, the guts and the passion to do it. Because if you,
it's more of a guts plus passion formula that we're talking.
it can be either or also, and I'm just trying to generalize that. But normally the two are quite linked when you're taking a business decision to go forward. And the same with what is happening here when we're doing our educational one. I'm extremely passionate about the fact that I think that education at scale and online is something that is it's not something that's caught on in India at all. It's hardly caught on in the West. I mean, your Coursera and your Udacity and all that are just happening what they're doing there. And each one is figuring out their model. So the good part is we're not 20 years behind the West. We're not even 20 months behind the West. We're even 2 days behind the West. And I think the credibility is the most important part as far as online is concerned, because most people join, but then they leave in 2-3 months. So how do we get that stickiness? So we're extremely passionate and extremely excited about that. And yes, it requires guts, because now not most people would get in and start saying we want to do it online and we want to do it in higher secondary education and we want to go out in there. So it's a combination of both.
So then just diverging from the mainstream thing, talking about the work that Swadesh does. So what do you think, and how much do you think solar holds place in India?
Solar is very strong. I mean, I think it's
Because currently people, I belong to the solar industry.
Yeah.
We have opened a company which is into solar.
Yeah.
So the broad mindset of the people in India is that people knowing this, just the S of solar are taking the plunge.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
So
more.
what's
of
your
a-
question?
So how much do you think it holds in the
I
Indian
think it's a
market?
huge segment. I think the caution is that most people are looking at it as a social segment right now. They're looking at it as being a social entrepreneur. And the minute you start looking at that, then everyone thinks, oh, so this is a subsidized thing, and
Yeah, because
it's for less
that's
profit. And then most investors will say, yeah, but not for me because I'm looking for higher returns. So if you want to get into it as a business, don't look at it as being a social business. You got to look at it as a business where you want to do it at scale. And I think most people lose the plot there and decide that solar is whatever else. So, when wind power came in, you did have a Suzlon taking it. I know they had a few of their setbacks because they may have overcapitalized or whatever, but the vision was right in that same aspect. And, it still got incredible, but, one or two mistakes and then you're set back 5 years. I think solar is massive.
Because what we've generally observed is that all the automation companies are floating their separate solar wings or separate solar companies. So it's like everybody wants to take the plunge in the big thing.
I don't think it's that crowded yet. Question is at what scale do you want to operate your business? I think there's a lot of scope still.
Because
But don't look at it as a subsidized business, that's all. And which is tough because most people do view it. So when you say solar, everyone thinks, oh, okay, social space, social entrepreneur. And then your capacity to scale and build and attract large capital may be a problem.
Good evening,
Good
Ronnie.
evening.
My compliments to you regarding the master of ceremonies you conducted with Brad Padamsi and the lady who works with her before the shows. I work with sponsorships with her. So that's a big compliment in Paul Padamsi's show to you. And the launch of the book, which is a very, triggering book for the entire whole of entrepreneurship world. So thank you for that. And the question to you is, I am Tasneem Besiwala and I have taken a franchisee with the Eaton House Singapore, which is Serra International, a preschool. So after a long time in corporates, I've gone into the franchisee with this preschool. We also have childcare to use optimum space towards the end. The property is ours, there's no rental involved. It's almost 4 years time now and the school is growing, it's become a landmark in Colaba. And I need to know what is the cutoff for a franchise model because we are paying a lot of royalty to them. When I have dreams of starting something of my own, so do I convert this model into my own or do I start with something of my own separately on the same grounds?
Yeah. So I think we have to go back to the reason of why you took the franchise. Is it more because you wanted a brand name to start off with? Is it because you felt that they had some technology, some aspects,
Yes.
some SOP that got you going?
Yes,
in
I
what
have
you
a
wanted
daughter
to do?
who's 21 years, but I went as a mother of a 2-year-old.
Yeah, no, so the
Find out
question is
in
if your
25
answer is on
schools.
that, see then there's an ethical issue. So I can't get into the ethical issues of whether you believe that that's...
No, I found Ronnie, I found that the schools where I went to, different like Tree House or maybe Eurokid and all, were not as good as
Yep.
Serra and Juhu.
Yep.
The children are more bubbly.
Yep.
So I found maybe the curriculum and the teachers and the entire, the aspect of looking after them would be good, and that's how I took the franchise.
I got all that. So what's your question?
My question is, when do you, if I have to start something of my own, for example, if I just have this one property now, do I convert it into my own brand name? Will it be a wise decision or still carry on for a few more years? I think the turnover we are having right now in 4 years is maybe around 65 lakhs. So is there a good thing of converting it into my own brand or going on the Serra name itself?
Yes, and I was trying to answer the question that no. Look,
Cannot
nobody's
be.
going to be able to give you answers other than put it into some
Right,
sense of
okay.
questions to you, and I think what you need to ask yourself is, what you set out to do to get a franchise operation, are you getting that weightage to be able to take it across, and will that still set you apart? The franchise fee that you're paying them will always get you the better technology, better
Yes.
aspect, and get you higher recognition,
Mhm.
then that's perfectly fine.
Mhm.
If you believe, no, for the next 5 years, I don't want to start I don't want to patronize somebody else's brand, I want to build my own brand, then there's no better time than immediately.
Okay.
Then why waste your time on that thought process? But if you're cut out for that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you lose your mojo on why you started that with this, and it goes downhill, that's going to be your big challenge as far as that is concerned. So everyone thinks they can start a burger joint, but the reason is that you're going to make a lot more money with McDonald's because they've made all the mistakes, and they're giving you that approach. And you can start a Palladium hotel down the road here, and then realize that everyone books around the world based on X, Y, Z, and I either need to have a Shangri-La association, or a Hyatt association, or a St. Regis association. And but it's my hotel, and I built it, and whatever else. And the president did that, and so hotels is also a good place where most people feel that's the base. So it really depends on you. If you believe, no, I don't want to work as a franchisee and build somebody else's brand because I will never build value, this is the time to start. But if you believe, I want to run this as a business and it's okay if it's somebody else's brand because it's going to be a much more profitable business for me and that's more important, then stay with this model.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah.
Today is their day. So you can.
No, go ahead.
Hi, Ronnie. My name is Benita Venkatraman. I run a consultancy in the development sector. And as clients and partners, we work with multiple stakeholders. This could be the government, international donor agencies, corporates, etc. So my question is really in the context of the trend in the industry that there are so many solutions that are inclusive, that are self-sustainable, where you can actually involve the bottom of the pyramid and have these long-term solutions. But to achieve scale, it's important to have these various stakeholders partner with each other, which is the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
So the first question is, do you have any thoughts on how that can be done? I mean,
It's tough.
It's tough.
It is tough.
And that leads to my second question, which is more personal. Congratulations on Swades. I mean, because I'm in the sector, I really think it's a great initiative. My question to you is, what is it that made you sort of switch from whatever you were doing in the past to, I don't know if it's full time, but a lot of your time and energy is invested in Swades?
Yeah, I don't think it was a switch. I think you're right. The switch is more in terms of spending more time with it. But I think that depends on each trajectory in your life and where that happens. So I think we were quite clear we wanted to do something in the social space, but we were doing it for 10 years, but at a very small scale. I think when we had the resources, because we sold an enterprise and gained from it, I think it was very clear that we wanted to scale it up. But I think within the second of when we decided we wanted to scale it up, we were very clear we wanted to create an institution and not to do philanthropy, which is cut a check, work with 5 NGOs and disperse the money. So to me today, as much as it's gratifying what we're doing in Swades, it's how we're doing it. And I think therefore building an organization that has 1,200 people now working for it and creating an organization culture and sort of institutionalizing the social sector to me is as much fun and challenge as it is as to what the outcome of it is. So I think that's what turned me on also.
And my first question about the challenge of the multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, I think the problem.
It is a challenge. I'm just wondering.
No,
there's no one solution.
No, but it's a solution is on scale. How you're going to scale that is something. But you may not want to do that. You may want to keep it as boutique and look at it in a very different
I'm
manner.
not talking about my business. I'm talking about any sort of solution that there may be there in the social sector.
Yeah.
Any solution.
Yes.
So it could be on solar. It could be on.
So what's
various,
so what's the question?
So
of
there
that?
are multiple stakeholders. So
Yes.
government has scale.
Yeah.
International USAID, BMGF have the money. You have corporates who have a certain skill set, etc. And the best solution is to sort of combine all of them.
No, it's not
or
the best
not.
solution because it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't really work.
It doesn't work that way. So you have to find your own scale. I mean, look, even today in the sector that we are in, it will be easier for. It'll be silly for us not to engage the government when we're building toilets and water. But our 4-year